Are you unsure how to adjust your Rainbird sprinkler? Do you need to make just one small change, but messing with it feels like operating a spaceship? Today, we're going to show you how to make adjustments to your Rainbird rotor. We'll be using a 5000 series rotor, but this works with the 5000 Plus and others made by Rainbird. Understanding the adjustments on a sprinkler rotor, like the Rainbird 5000, might seem a little tricky at first. But don't worry, I'm here to explain it in a super easy way. My goal in this video is that you should only need to watch it once. So first, I'm going to do the quick, no-nonsense guide, and then for the rest of the video, I'm going to break it down in depth for you. To make adjustments to a Rainbird rotor, all you need is the Rainbird rotor tool or a flathead screwdriver. Because the two adjustment slots on the top of the rotor are simply screws that are covered up by this rubber top. The only thing a flathead screwdriver can't do that this can do is lift it up for replacing or inserting a nozzle. To adjust the arc, which is how much the sprinkler turns, set the left stop by turning the sprinkler head to the left until it clicks where you want it to start. Adjust the right stop using the screw marked with a plus and minus. Turn it clockwise to make it turn farther to the right and counterclockwise to make it turn less. If you mess up the left stop, we'll show you how to fix that later in the video. We've set chapter markers so you can easily skip forward to that part of the video. To adjust the radius, which is how far the water sprays, use a flathead screwdriver in the top adjustment screw inside the arrow. Turn it clockwise to make the spray shorter and counterclockwise to make it go farther. And finally, if you see a slot about here that I haven't identified, that probably means you have a Rainbird 5000 Plus. And that's actually a flow control stop where you can completely shut off the rotor. That's the basics. But now, that sounds simple, right? There are some quirks to rotor heads that will be useful for you to know, so you can avoid kneeling down in the hot sun, getting all wet and ultimately frustrated because something unexpected occurred. I'm going to share some tips, some tricks, and some important mistakes to avoid so that you have everything you need to know. Let's look at all the main parts of a rotor so we can see how it works. All right, with the head pulled up, you can see all the parts of the sprinkler. So right here, this part that's usually buried in the ground, that's the body or the case. Coming up from that, we've the stem, also called the riser. Above that is the turret, that's the part that actually moves back and forth while it's running. And finally, right at the very end, we've got the nozzle, which is what sprays the water. All the adjustments that can be made on the Rainbird 5000 series can be done at the top of the turret cap. Here, we have 4 different slots. First is the radius adjustment slot. We have the pull-up slot, a nozzle identification slot, and here we have the arc adjustment slot. And you might also have a 5th slot right in the center if you have a 5000 Plus. That's an on-off valve to turn the spray completely on or off directly from the rotor itself. On the radius adjustment slot, you notice that there's an arrow. This indicates where the water is going to come out from, and it's lined up with the nozzle. The radius screw allows the radius to be shortened by up to 35% without even changing the nozzle. And this can be adjusted while the sprinkler is in operation, like you can see here. If you need to make more than a 35% adjustment to the radius, you'll need to change out the nozzle on your rotor. Check out the video in the top right or description below if you need to do this. A helpful tip on the 5000, 42SA, and 52SA to easily identify which nozzle each rotor has at a glance without pulling them up individually to check is to use the small identification plugs that come with your nozzles and insert the corresponding plug into the nozzle identification slot on the turret cap. Here, on the middle right side of the turret, we have the pull-up slot. You can use the Rainbird rotor tool by inserting it into the pull-up slot and then twisting it 90 degrees. And, as the name suggests, pull it up to reveal the rotor nozzle. Here on the arc adjustment slot, that is where you can change how far the turret turns to the right during operation. You can see a plus and a minus. Turning it clockwise or towards the plus is going to make the rotor turn further. Turning it counterclockwise or towards the minus sign will make it not turn as far. The rotor can be adjusted to spray anywhere from 40 to a full circle at 360 degrees. Now note, anytime you adjust with the plus or the minus on the arc adjustment slot, it's only going to change the right-hand side. To change the left stop is a little bit different. I'm going to show you how to do that here in just a moment. Before I move on, if this video has been helpful so far, give us a like below so that it can be helpful for others as well. For adjusting your radius and arc, you won't need to use the pull-up feature. All you really need is a flathead screwdriver. But if you want to keep the turret head pulled up for easier access, like if it's buried in some tall grass, you'll need a pull-up tool. If you don't have a Rainbird rotor tool, pull-up slots are universal, so any rotor adjustment tool will have this same ability to do this. We recommend that you use an adjustment tool to avoid damage to your rotor, and I've placed links to my recommendations for rotor tools in the description. But if you're particularly handy, you may find an alternative to work in a pinch. After you've pulled up the rotor, you can grasp the riser with your hand to hold it up. However, The spring on the Rainbird 5000 is pretty strong, so another tool you may find useful is an insertion collar. This holds up the stem of the rotor and makes working on it much easier. Even better, on the 5000 Plus, you can turn the rotor off and on with a special adjustment right on the sprinkler head. This makes it easy to adjust each rotor individually with no need for extra tools to hold them up. This means you can change out a nozzle while the sprinkler system is operating, and thus you don't need to pull up the rotor by hand. Just remember, never use a metal tool on the stem. It may sound great in theory, but you don't want to use channel locks, pliers, or wrenches to hold up the turret. It can scratch the turret, which over time is going to cause friction that wears against the seals, and eventually it's going to start leaking. And when the seals are leaking, it's not going to be able to hold pressure underneath the turret, so it might not pop up. And even if it does, it's going to be spraying water where you damage the seal. At that point in time, the entire rotor has to be replaced. If you've ever had a rotor suddenly stop popping up, that could be why. Okay, now that you have the basics and you know the different parts of the rotor, let's take a more detailed look at adjustment because there's some nuance there that's important to understand. Let's start with the arc adjustment. And recall, this is how far the turret turns during operation, anywhere from 40 to a full circle at 360 degrees. This you can use to keep the spray from the rotor from hitting things that you don't want it to, like the side of the house or the garage or the sidewalk or a driveway. When adjusting a Rainbird rotor, the arc adjustment slot only adjusts the right stop. So if I were to increase the arc by turning towards the plus side, it would turn further to the right, but it would still stop in the same place at the left. When you're adjusting the spray arc, each 90-degree turn will add or remove 90 degrees, depending on which way you're turning it. When the maximum arc of 360 degrees or the minimum arc of 40 degrees is achieved, you hear a ratcheting noise come from the rotor. That's a signal not to manipulate it too much more, or you risk damaging the gears. It's usually best to make all the adjustments you can using the right, but sometimes you will have to adjust the left, and I'll show you how here in a few moments. But first, let's go over the basics on adjusting the right-hand stop. First thing you want to do when you're adjusting the arc is to find your left and right stop. This way you know where it's already spraying to see what you even need to change to begin with. To do so, simply use your hand and turn it counterclockwise until you hear the click of it stopping. We're now at the very start of the rotor cycle. Now we can turn it to the right and hear the same thing, and we'll know exactly where this is spraying. And that is where it's going to stop before it returns to the left. And now we know where our rotor is spraying. It ends right here and it begins right here. Now, let's say we want to do more than 180 degrees, somewhere between 250 to 270 degrees. Using a flathead screwdriver or a Rainbird tool, we insert it into the arc adjustment slot. I want to increase the arc, so I'm going to turn it clockwise or towards the plus side. And there we go. We've almost got a full circle, but not quite. Now, if you're having any difficulty with this part, you can actually do this while the rotor is on. That way you can see where it begins and ends with the stream of water coming out. If you want to adjust the arc while the rotor is running, Rainbird recommends adjusting the arc adjustment screw only in the direction the rotor is turning. One trick you can use if you want to avoid adjustment while the sprinkler is running is to increase the arc so the right stop is further right than what you're aiming for. Rotate the turret all the way to the right. This way the arrow displays where the right stop is currently set. Then reduce the arc and use the arrow as a guide. The arrow will turn as you reduce the arc. The arrow, in this case, signifies where the right stop is located, and you can just stop when the arrow hits the arc you are aiming for. Though it's best to make adjustments to the right stop, sometimes you're going to have to do it from the left, and there's a couple ways to do that. No matter what method you're using, the first step is always to first find your left stop. When you hear it click at the left stop, you know you're at the very start of the arc. Now, this first method only applies if you have a Rainbird 5000 rotor that's been in the ground for 2 weeks or less. If yours has been in the ground for more than 2 weeks, please fast forward to the next method. In addition to that, avoid using this method while the water is running. Skip to the next method to adjust the left stop while the water is running. Now, let's say we want that stop to be a little bit further to the left. On a Rainbird rotor, you can simply gently continue to turn the top a little bit. This will push both the left and right stops over simultaneously. Then, if necessary, you can readjust the right stop with the adjustment slot. When you check your arc, listen for the little click that signals that you've reached the end of the arc. If you go too far with your left stop adjustment, you'll need to rotate the entire rotor back to set the left stop correctly, as it only adjusts in one direction. Then from there, you'd adjust your right stop accordingly. That's how you adjust the arc on all newer Rainbird rotors. But what if you have an older one? In that case, the left stop is actually fixed. and cannot be changed. To adjust the left stop in those cases, first you want to position the turret at the left stop. Then you'll probably have to dig around the body in order to get the leverage you need to adjust the stop by tightening or loosening the entire body. There we go. We just adjusted the left stop by tightening it onto its connection a little bit tighter. Keep in mind, as you just saw, this method moves both the left and the right stop. That means if you adjust the left stop by tightening the rotor on its threads, you'll need to go back and check whether adjustment on the right stop is needed. You could use some channel locks to reduce or eliminate the need to dig, but you do want to be careful of over-tightening or loosening too much. If you over-tighten it, you could crack your rotor. If it's too loose, it could leak. And in those situations, there is one more method you can do that is very effective. For this method, simply unthread the body from the case, and we're going to lift the whole body out and rotate it wherever we want the left stop to be, like this. Pull the body out until you can rotate it freely. Then you can align the left stop wherever you would like. Then push the turret back into the housing, hold your left stop, and tighten the cap back up. And there we are. That's our new left stop. Similar to the other method, this will change both the left and right stop. So further adjustment may be necessary. Now, let's take a closer look at radius adjustment. The radius, or how far the water goes, is adjusted using this slot. There's a screw beneath this slot that holds your nozzle in, and it's also the radius adjustment screw. If you tighten the screw by turning it clockwise or righty-tighty, it will lower and start blocking some of the flow, thus lowering the radius, like this. Now remember, if I turn it counterclockwise or lefty-loosey, I'm retracting the screw and increasing the radius. If I turn it clockwise or righty-tighty, I'm lowering the screw and lowering the radius. When increasing your radius, about 5 to 8 full turns of the screw is all you can do. Any more than that, the first time you run water through it, that nozzle is going to go flying. If that happens, just grab your nozzle and seat it back into place and screw it back in, just enough to keep it secure. You can test this by using your tool and gently prying at this slot. If it doesn't pop out, you're good to go. If you want to learn how to change out the nozzle on your rotor, click the video that just popped up on screen.